November 2, 1992 Observer Newsletter, Horrendous WCW Pay-Per-View, Decline in Wrestling, Flair Career in Jeopardy. By Observer Staff. Staff at WrestlingObserver.com. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. November 2, 1992. Halloween Havoc, Night of the Promotional Living Dead. Thumbs up 26.07, 2%. Thumbs down 317, 87.6%. In the middle 19.05, 2%. Best match poll. Brian Pillman vs. Rick Steamboat 118 votes. Rhodes and Wyndham vs. Austin and Williams 92 votes. Big Van Vader vs. Nikita Koloff 27 votes. Sink and Douglas and Gunn vs. Anderson and Eden and Hayes 19 votes. Worst match poll. Rick Rude vs. Masachono 116 votes. Ron Simmons vs. Barbarian 109 votes. Sting vs. Jake Roberts 72 votes. Based on phone calls and fax messages as of Tuesday morning, October 27. Margin of error very little. Things are really bad. It's not just Halloween Havoc. It's not just TV ratings hitting record lows. It's not just WWF canceling house shows left and right. It's not just WCW not canceling house shows but not drawing any fans to its house shows. What's bad is, the wrestling business is in a tunnel, and there is no sign of light at the end. There is at least an indication in the back of my mind that the WWF is going to get through this, if only because Vince McMahon does have a track record of success, even though the only real thing that would be evidence that it is going to happen is McMahon's track record and more talk of a possible return of Hulk Hogan. Bill Watts had a track record as well, but based on television and the pay-per-view this weekend, WCW seems like a runaway train, without a conductor, headed straight for a wall. The wall may be called Battle Bowl, but the wall is probably just called 1993. WCW is in a state of systematic destruction. Real wrestling talent is being exchanged with talent that doesn't have the experience or seasoning, or in some cases, even the talent, to hang in a major league operation. It doesn't appear to be a concern as long as the new talent seems willing to work cheaper than the experienced talent, or simply has a relative in high places. Even that wouldn't necessarily be so bad if the company was going on course with a viable new direction and needed fresh new talent and had the leadership that will teach and groom the newcomers into being legitimate talent. Unfortunately, that also isn't the case. The old stale talent gets more response than the fresh new talent. In 1993, WCW looks to be falling to the level of the last few years of the AWA, both in terms of talent, product quality and overall interest. Halloween Havoc wasn't the worst pay-per-view in history, although it was among the worst. The WWF has put on shows that were terrible from start to finish. 2 of them were WrestleManias. This show was only terrible from the middle point of the show to the finish. The first half was good, particularly when it came to wrestling action, although the lack of direction and terrible main events made the feeling coming out of the show it's being worse. Even on the worst WWF pay-per-view show, when it was over you knew what direction the company was going in and there were ideas for new matchups that would be upcoming. They usually work to end the show on a positive note. WCW once put on a pay-per-view card, the Great American Bash, in which the matchups going in looked horrible on paper, were by and large even worse in reality. And the main event changed 2 weeks before, then confused the fans by turning both participants during the main event, and the most over babyface at the show was a heel who had just been fired 2 weeks earlier. But as bad as that show was and as bad as things looked after the 1991 Great American Bash, WCW still had a larger television viewing audience, a stronger syndicated network, better overall talent and more potential for future interest. The Bash of '91 was worse than the Havoc of '92, but the company is coming out of the Havoc of '92 in its worst condition ever. During the 1991 Bash it was like watching a promotion take many steps down the road to oblivion. The second half of Havoc was the visual example of watching the fat lady sing for the promotion. People will be pointing fingers at each other all week trying to put the blame on someone else for how this turned out. But one thing is clear, based on every imaginable criteria to judge, Bill Watts' reign thus far has been a failure. It's not just a bad pay-per-view show. It's hardly just losing some name talent with more losses to come. It's not the morale problem. It's the lack of direction. The change in philosophy has gone from no philosophy to even less concept of no philosophy. Nothing is being built for the future. No ideas are being built for a concept for the future. It's just scatterbrained 1970s ideas and concepts thrown out so fast that even if they weren't outdated, which some are, they still are being grounded out in a manner which they couldn't work. Turns are decided upon, started, then dropped in the middle. So are storylines. Characters are dropped and then brought back as if they weren't dropped, and buried once again. Title belts are given to wrestlers who have already made it clear they are leaving the promotion for God only knows what reason, and then they leave the promotion. The turns that do happen come out of nowhere with no storyline and angles that make no sense. A man is made world champion simply because of his skin color, because of a mistaken antiquated notion about how that will draw black fans to pro wrestling matches, which is now beginning to set off a new low is race-baiting angles. Every criticism of Titan Sports and every way that WCW was supposed to set a new direction and a new course for this business has been exposed as a fraud. Every statement on steroids has been exposed as nothing but hot air, which was only made worse when Jim Ross spoke of the other guys having the posers. While Watts proclaimed that WCW was going back to wrestling, the real deal, and needing to bring credibility back to the product, on his first pay-per-view show that he was willing to take full responsibility for. Previous shows he was willing to blame his predecessors because wheels for those shows were in motion before he got there. Even though in the case of the Bash, he was in charge from start to finish for all the television build-up of the show, we heard announcers talking about anti-venom, a snake chewing on a man's cheek, a string of ref bump finishes, a major no-show, the most blatant example of bait-and-switch advertising in recent pay-per-view history, and finishing off with the destruction of the credibility of the every major singles title in the promotion. The show live at the Philadelphia Civic Center drew an estimated 7,000 fans. Best guess would be close to 5,000 of that paid, and around an $80,000 house were almost exactly the same figures that WWF drew at the Spectrum the previous weekend. The gate was probably the largest of the year for WCW. War Games in Jacksonville was the biggest house thus far in 1992 at $72,000. The live reports were that the show was even worse live than on pay-per-view. At least on pay-per-view, even though Jesse Ventura's match analysis was non-existent. He was funny as hell, which made things entertaining amidst the 3 hours of slow death. I'd guess they did wonders long-term for themselves in the Philadelphia market. The crowd was up for the opening pay-per-view match, but very little else afterward. In the dark match, Eric Watts and Van Hammer beat Vinny Vegas and Diamond Dallas Page in 12 minutes when Watts pinned Page with an Oklahoma side roll. 1 star. 1. Tom Zenk and Shane Douglas and Johnny Gunn. Tom Brandy beat Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton and Michael Hayes in 11:02 when Gunn pinned Hayes with a Thez press. This match had a good amount of heat, although the crowd was heavily cheering the heels. Many people mistakenly labeled the fans as heel fans, but that's a misnomer because they didn't cheer the heel in any other match. Match varied from solid to kind of sloppy, depending on if Gunn or Hayes were in or not. Eaton did a great clip spot on Douglas to start some quick heat, and a knee drop to Douglas' legit injured ankle. He hurt it 6 days earlier at a TV taping, along with a figure 4. Well-paced opener, and really the 4 guys who could work dominated the time, but there was nothing spectacular or out of the ordinary about the match. Gunn made the hot tag and they did a 6-way before hitting the finish. Crowd booed the finish heavily. 2.5 stars. 2. Rick Steamboat pinned Brian Pillman in 10:35 after a double reversal coming off a hot-looking sunset flip off the top rope by Steamboat. The action was very good, but it seemed they were just getting into it when they went to the finish. These guys could have used a little more time to do the pay-per-view quality match that this looked to be on paper. Still, at this point, the show was pretty good. 3.25 stars. Then came Bill Watts as the bearer of good news. After Missy Hyatt did her shtick of trying to find out who the referee the heels would pick for the Rude Chono match, with the segment ending with the idea put across that it would be a secret until match time, and the totally undramatic Team Japan picked Kensuke Sasaki to be the ref, Bill Watts came out for his get himself over to the Marks interview to announce Terry Gordy was suspended for a contract violation and would be out of the tag title match. Gordy actually quit the promotion that morning, and replaced by Steve Austin, and that we just found out it'll be Harley Race, as if the viewers were just told. Which they did hint as Race walked by Missy as she was doing her shtick into Rude's dressing room, and Sasaki as the referees. Watts also said that there had been a court injunction and Rude wouldn't wrestle twice, but they are allowing Big Van Vader to wrestle Nikita Koloff and defend Rude's U.S. title for him. This was handled poorly because the storyline made no sense, and if in the storyline they were going to use this excuse, the heels should have at least the last 2 weekends before the show hinted of going to court to block it. It's like they wanted to advertise Rude working twice, wanted to have Vader destroy Koloff to make fans forget about him and to set up Vader and Rude feuding over the US belt, but didn't have a clue as to how to logically get there, so came up with an idea off the top of someone's head which must have required 20 seconds of thought. 3. Ironically, Vader's destruction of Koloff was probably a better match than Rude would have had with Koloff, but it destroys title credibility when a champion can pick someone to defend the title for him. Vader, who gained about 25 pounds, to around 400, because of being idled by knee surgery, won with a power bomb at 11:53. 2 3/4 stars. 4. Wyndham and Rhodes retained the NWA/WCW tag titles going to a 30-minute draw with the two Steve Williams, Dr. Yogi Berra of Wrestling Death and a stunning Mr. Austin. It actually lasted 30-31. Jesse Ventura was really funny on commentary. The work was good, but there was no crowd heat, which made the match seem worse than it really was. Austin is technically, athletically very good, but his weakness when it comes to charisma was apparent in such a long match. The match seemed to have no storyline. It was just a series of solid maneuvers going back and forth with no crowd reaction. The storyline going in of Wyndham and Rhodes having problems seemingly was dropped cold, although the announcers did acknowledge it. The fans not being educated to submissions makes it hard to do a technical wrestling match and go this long and have it get over. In addition, since Williams and Austin aren't a team, it was kind of preordained that there wouldn't be a title change, which also made things drag in such a long match. Rhodes bled from a cut that was reopened from an accident that took place earlier in the week. At about 28 minutes, they did a false finish with a ref bump by Randy Anderson. First Wyndham had Austin pinned, then Williams lariated Wyndham and Austin was pinning him, and ref Nick Patrick counted to 3 and the bell rang. Anderson overruled Patrick and restarted the match, and Rhodes schoolboyed Austin for Anderson counted 2, but the bell rang anyway. They then brawled for a hot 90 seconds or so of near falls before time ran out. 3 stars. Next was the Paul E. Dangerously/Medusa skit. Actually, it started out with Harley Race and Van Vader doing an interview. Dangerously came out and thanked them for defending the title for Rude and said he'd give them half the payoff, which, if they let him go on any longer, would have turned Race and Vader face, because shouldn't they get the entire payoff? Well, Medusa came out and after a too brief build-up, was fired by Dangerously, basically called a bitch and a hooker, and Paul E. continued with the most heavy-handed put-downs on women imaginable. Medusa, who by this time was close to being the most over babyface in the building, kicked Paul in the head. Paul claimed his word was his contract and he could beat her with one hand tied behind his back. Smells like a November 18th match at the Clash, because I don't want to put money on the odds of Dangerously lasting through Starrcade at this rate. They did a pull-apart brawl with Dangerously going nuts on the mic. Even though the previous match was technically good, it did put the crowd to sleep. This woke everyone up and could have been the turning point of the entire show, as it drew tremendous heat. However, the turning point followed immediately. 5. Rude beat Chono via DQ in 22-33, so Chono retains the NWA title. The match that destroyed the show. The match that destroyed the NWA title in the United States. The only thing positive to say is that it's a good thing this wasn't televised in Japan. I wonder if this was the first time in wrestling history where two wrestlers, in their first meeting ever, had a potential match of the year, and then in their first rematch, had a potential worst match of the year? Before the match, Gary Capetta introduced Seiji Sakaguchi as NWA president, Hiro Matsuda and Minobu Nakanishi as a member of the Japanese Olympic team from Barcelona. Ross at this point commented about how glad he was he didn't have to pronounce those names. Can you imagine that comment from another perspective? Let's say Bruce Baumgartner went to the next card at Sumo Hall, and the New Japan announcer and didn't even talk about who the guy is and blew it off with a remark like, "Boy, I'm sure glad I don't have to pronounce those American names." There was no reaction at all to the two referees, an angle that had been built up on television. Medusa, fired minutes earlier, came out with Rude anyway. After a coin flip, Race was chosen to referee in the ring, Sasaki outside the ring. So this was the most screwed-up match imaginable. The supposed top heel in the United States comes to ringside with a just-turned babyface who had just been fired minutes earlier but is still there anyway after being fired, with no plausible explanation. Ross and Ventura did address the subject, but there was no answer that made sense, and their attempt, saying that Rude had apparently chosen Medusa over Paul E., only served to make Rude theoretically a babyface, although in reality it made him another wrestler that nobody seemed to care about. To make matters stranger, the heel ref, Race, was officiating right down the line. At least that was good, because a full-fledged heel ref performance would have made this match even worse. Well, Rude wasn't a babyface here. Neither was Chono. The only babyface was Ric Flair, since the first 5 minutes consisted of "We want Flair" and "Who chants" that the announcers couldn't acknowledge. Chono was clearly way off because of his pinched nerve in his neck. Rude seemed disgusted. I guess part of it was because it became apparent he was over nowhere near the level that he probably thought he was, since nobody cared about anything that involved the match and instead used his match as a way to chant for a guy who left the promotion 16 months earlier. To make matters worse, Ross and Ventura blew the announcing here because they never explained and exclaimed when Chono put on his various submission holds, so it seemed like it was all dead time. And to make it even worse, early in the match when Chono put on a submission, Ventura made the comment about how Rude would never submit, and Ross, who I guess didn't want to disagree, agreed with him, which basically told the viewers that all the submissions were a waste of time because a guy like Rude would never submit. Once it's established that the big stars are never going to submit, you've killed the entire concept of submission holds, which is exactly what happened in this country about 10 years ago, which created the illusion that everything but high spots can be labeled as wrist holds and makes it much harder to work an effective and realistic match. Thus only gimmicks and high spots get over, neither of which are realistic, and then they complain because the heels don't have heat, and it's because the style doesn't allow anyone to take the product seriously. The crowd didn't understand the holds live, but the holds had never been put over previously on television, where fans are educated to the nuances, so why should they have? I guess wrestling fans are supposed to have ESP, since Rude and Chono knew what they were doing. Everyone else should have figured it out without being told as well. This made the match seem even more like it was going nowhere. At 19 minutes, when they should have been building for a finish, a fight broke out which diverted everyone's attention from a supposed world title match. Both guys by this point must have figured it was hopeless, because as they worked to the finish, they were missing spots. Chono kicked Race in the face when Rude ducked. Race went out of the ring and Sasaki tried to help him up. Chono then threw Rude over the top rope, and Rude landed on both Sasaki and Race, knocking them both down. Rude got back in, hit the Rude Awakening, but there was no ref to count. Chono made a comeback, caught Rude in the SDF, and Sasaki jumped in the ring and called for the bell to apparently signal Chono the winner via submission, although neither announcer acknowledged the word submission even existed in our language. Race overruled Sasaki and declared Rude the winner via DQ. Boy, that was a novel finish that nobody had ever seen before. Race then tried to attack Sasaki and Sasaki did a few slams on Race, who still took those picture-perfect bumps, then dropkicked Rude out of the ring. Truly a disaster in every way. One of the worst world title matches ever on pay-per-view. 3 stars. 6. Ron Simmons pinned Barbarian in 12:41 with a power slam to keep the WCW title. Simmons came out with an entourage of about 24 people, which only made him seem like a heel. There may be good reason behind pushing Simmons as one of the top babyfaces, but it's painfully obvious he's no world champion. Barbarian is even less of a #1 contender and only caused to expose what Simmons wasn't. The match and lack of crowd reaction for a world title match brought this point home. Simmons was working injured. Barbarian did a long Cobra hold, and Jesse Ventura showed he didn't watch Atlanta wrestling on cable while living in Minnesota by not knowing the Mongolian Stomper and Mark Lewin's dreaded Shinnomaki, which, incidentally, is actually named after a Tokyo train station. Anyway, Ross noted that this move causes unconsciousness. What he forget to say is it only causes unconsciousness among the live audience, not to the wrestler in the hold. Work was sloppy and crowd was dead. There was a good near fall when Simmons kicked out of the diving headbutt. One of the worst world title matches ever on pay-per-view TM. 1/4 of 1 star. Next up was an interview with Bruno Sammartino, Eric Watts, and Ron Simmons, with the idea that Watts would get the rub from standing alongside the wrestling legend and the current world champion. This got a lot of heat with a lot of people. This Eric Watts push is out of control. 7. Sting pinned Jake Roberts in 10:34 of a coal miner's glove match in the spin the wheel deal. Jake is a tremendous personality, one of the best in the business. But he suffered too many injuries to be able to work on top as a singles wrestler in a group where fans expect action. Jake has also killed Sting to the point he's risking being almost dead. I understand the number of fan letters Sting has gotten over the past 2 months has suddenly plummeted, and he got a very much on Sting-like lack of a pop coming out. Sting worked on Roberts' left arm most of the way. After a missed Stinger splash, Roberts hit the DDT. Sting got up before Jake could climb the pole and got elbowed. Second time he got up, he did a swing around the pole and climbed up to get the glove. At the same time, Cactus Jack ran out with the snake bag. Jake held the snake and Sting came down with the glove, and Sting hit Roberts with the glove and Roberts pulled the snake to make it look like it was biting his cheek and was pinned. Pin got no pop at all because Roberts distracted everyone from it with the snake. Unfortunately, the snake actually did gnaw on Roberts' cheek and he bled, which wasn't supposed to happen. I thought they were turning Roberts' face, but that wasn't the idea. Roberts ran to the dressing room with a snake being held to his cheek while we heard all about the antivenom backstage. The finish made a bad main event even worse. 1/4 of 1 star. Notes: no pay-per-view figures were available at press time. Bruno Sammartino, who hosted the show with Tony Schiavone, looked terribly out of place amidst all the garbage. With all the public statements Sammartino has said this year, it really looked bad being on a show with a snake, and with several guys on juice. There was a big rumor going around the WWF, and in fact it was reported in the New York Daily News that Sid Vicious was going to appear on the show as Rick Rude's choice as referee. Obviously that wasn't the plan at any time. Vicious and Watts may have talked, particularly since Vicious just got his release, although I've heard nothing substantive regarding him actually coming in. A fan at ringside was wearing a WBF tank top when the show started, but the shirt mysteriously turned into a WCW crew shirt. Good to see paranoia about clothing being worn by fans isn't limited to those at Titan Sports. Jim Ross was way off his usual big show form, perhaps related to his being criticized in Atlanta over a remark made on a football broadcast the week before. See page 10. More evidence of a decline in interest in wrestling came with last week's ratings, setting yet another record low, 1.64 average, for the third time in the past 6 weeks. WWF had its lowest rated weekend in history. Primetime did another 1.7 rating, tying its all-time non-holiday low. What made things worse was that this show by all rights should have done an artificially high rating coming off the Hart Flair title change, which should have increased interest at least for the weekend just out of mod curiosity, plus it was up against the weakest Monday Night Football game of the season. Because of the low ratings, expect to see the shows loaded up with quality matches, as this past Monday had 4 competitive matches including Randy Savage vs. Shawn Michaels, because ratings are now in the danger zone. All-American did set a record non-holiday low with a 1.5. On the WCW side, there were no record lows, but continued weak numbers, with the Saturday night show headlined by Pillman and Austin vs. Rhodes and Armstrong doing a 1.9, while Main Event, with a Marcus Bagwell vs. Diamond Dallas Page headliner, did a 1.5, its third lowest rating in history. Power Hour did a 1.6. Being that this is now October and viewing overall is way up from the summer, yet the wrestling audience continues to drop, makes this even more of a bad sign than it looks on the surface. I can't imagine numbers not getting at least slightly better in future weeks, only because more people will be watching television as each week goes by, but who would have believed an all-time record low for viewing would be set in mid-October? For a while this past week, the career of Ric Flair appeared to be in jeopardy. The original prognosis of Flair's recovery time from what the doctors claimed to be 99% sure of are broken nerve endings in his ear, which were causing him frequent dizzy spells, was that he would need to take 1 year off wrestling. Flair received better news on Thursday after being treated for a condition technically called cupulothias, with the doctors recommending he be sidelined between 6 and 12 weeks provided he go through a new treatment program. The program consists of him having air blown in his ears and having to remain in a sitting-up position for 48 consecutive hours till it crystallizes the broken nerve endings. Flair apparently suffered the original injury on October 8 in Phoenix in a match with Ultimate Warrior. Doctors have warned Flair that any kind of a jarring blow that would aggravate the injury would make the condition much worse and probably end his career. Even though the doctors recommended 6 weeks plus off, apparently Flair's plans are to return to action at the November 15th house show in Oakland, and at this point it appears he's a definite to appear at Survivor Series in the tag team match Main Event. Survivor's appears going in to almost surely be the lowest buy rate of any WWF pay-per-view in history, but if Flair was taken out of the Main Event and they had to announce a replacement, it would have only made things worse. Flair was on CBS and CNN News with George Bush since he spent Tuesday on the train in the Carolinas campaigning with the president. Flair was never identified and appeared to be just a member of the entourage. The president called Flair one of the greatest athletes of all time. Another of the biggest names of the 1980s has left the WWF, Animal of the Legion of Doom, Joe Laurinaitis. According to an interview in Wrestling Flyer newsletter, Animal, who quit on Wednesday, said he wanted to go home because he suffered a broken tailbone in his September 15th match in Yokohama, Japan against the Beverly Brothers, although he continued to work until a match at the San Francisco Cow Palace on October 10th. Animal expressed his unhappiness with how Hawk handled the breaking up of the duo that had been together since 1983. WWF officials claimed to have no knowledge of Animal quitting, even though the interview had already been published. Animal did say that he probably wouldn't have quit had he still been together as part of the tag team, even with the injury. Animal is said to have a Lloyd's of London insurance policy similar to that of Curt Hennig, so he's collecting on his disability insurance. Something tells me that the Lloyd's premiums for pro wrestlers are going to go way up next year. WWF also canceled several house shows this coming weekend. Not sure of the specifics other than I know of October 31st in Memphis and November 1st in Nashville and Huntsville, all headlined by Randy Savage vs. Razor Ramon, canceled due to poor advances. There may be other dates canceled as well, as I was told the WWF would only run with one troupe on the road this coming weekend, and that Savage and Ramon would be added to the other cards in order to create a more loaded lineup. I've heard no official talk about any other cancellations at this point. The Fox Network primetime special will be on November 14, a Saturday night main event from 9 to 10 p.m. that'll be taped later this week. The matches announced are Money Incorporated defending the tag title against Savage and Warrior, Bret Hart defending against Papa Shango, and Ric Flair vs. Big Boss Man, which seemingly was designed to give Flair a major television win to set up his December run with Hart. Obviously the latter match will have to be changed. All Japan Pro Wrestling had its 100th consecutive Tokyo sellout on October 21st, celebrating the 20th anniversary of the formation of the company. Even though all 16,300 tickets for Budokan Hall were sold out on the first day, they were put on sale with no matches announced. The Ultimate Mitsuharu Misawa vs. Toshiaki Kawada dream match was set up and said to have been every bit as good as the high expectations were for the match going in. Misawa kept the Triple Crown, winning with a Tiger Suplex, a reverse grip full Nelson taken over into a German Suplex, in just over 29 minutes. They also had a Legends 6-man tag match with Giant Baba and Dory Funk and Stan Hansen vs. Jumbo Tsuruta and Terry Gordy and Andre the Giant. Baba and Andre had only been opponents twice in their careers, once for about 1 minute during a tag match in Tokyo in 1991, and once in the mid-1970s for about 45 during a battle royal in Honolulu. In addition, Funk and Hansen have always been rivals in Japan, as have Tsuruta and Gordy. At one point during the match, as Baba and Andre were brawling, if that word can be used for whatever it was they were doing, Terry Funk, who was in Baba's team's corner, hacked Andre outside the ring. Baba stopped Terry from attacking Andre. Tsuruta pinned Dory in 14:32 with a small package, which was a big deal only because Dory has done very few jobs in Japan over the years. Even though Tsuruta has been on top in Japan since the day he broke in and had pinned just about every wrestler at one time or another that had ever worked for this office, the one guy he never pinned was Dory, the other one he never pinned was Baba, who was his original trainer back in the old Amarillo territory in 1973. Reports are the show was considered a major success. There had to be disappointment the same night, since New Japan ran the finals of its tag team tournament at the Hamamatsu Arena and only drew a reported 4,500 in the 7,500-seat building. No doubt the All Japan Big Show had something to do with it, although Hamamatsu is a few hours from Tokyo, and the big ticket prices, $120 ringside down to $24, probably had a lot to do with it. New Japan is simply running too many major shows in too short a period of time, since they held a major show in Chiba just 3 nights earlier and didn't sell that building out either. As for the tournament, Shinya Hashimoto and Riki Choshu came out the winners. Going into the final night, there were 4 teams still in the running. Keiji Muto and Bam Bam Bigelow went into the last night with a 4-1-0 record in the driver's seat and a sentimental favorite, since Bigelow announced before the show that it was his final match in Japan because he was starting for the WWF 5 days later at the TV, and had signed a 2-year contract. Tony Halme and Masa Chono, with a 4-2-0 record, were tied for first place, but had already completed their round-robin schedule. Choshu and Hashimoto, who had a match on the final night against Tatsumi Fujinami and Manobu Nakanishi, and Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki, who were facing Muto and Bigelow, were both 3-1-1. Choshu and Hashimoto won their match to set up these possibilities for the upcoming Muto and Bigelow vs. Hazi and Sasaki match. If Hazi and Sasaki won, and Choshu and Hashimoto would meet in an added 1-fall, no time limit match to determine the tournament winner. If Muto and Bigelow won, they would win the tournament outright. If it was a 30-minute draw, Muto and Bigelow would face Choshu and Hashimoto in an added sudden death playoff match. In the upset, Sasaki pinned Bigelow on his last night in with a German suplex at 15:54, to send Hazi and Sasaki into the sudden death match. Choshu pinned Sasaki with a lariat in 15:45 to win the tournament. This is typical New Japan booking, since Choshu wasn't the focus during the NWA tournament, and Hashimoto did 2 jobs, one for Root and the other in a tag title match against the Steiners. In important matches on that tour, it was their turn to be put over. Sasaki gained enough scoring his first pinfall on Bigelow that he didn't need to be put over for the tournament because he had already upped his position in the fans' eyes. The biggest gate of the week was 2 nights later at Budokan Hall for the UWFI. with tickets from $160 down to $24. The group sold out 3 weeks ahead of time and got special permission to add more ringside chairs than ever before to draw the largest sports crowd ever in the building's 16,500 fans, breaking the record set by All Japan at the past several shows, including 2 nights earlier. The draw here was the return of Koji Kiao, the former Yokozuna, in what UWFI was billing as a martial arts mixed match against its world heavyweight champion, Nobuhiko Takada. Kiao, who is the youngest Yokozuna in history, sumo grand champion, who was kicked out of sumo a few years back and turned to pro wrestling and ended up being kicked out of both New Japan and War before turning to the supposed shooting style, is a major celebrity in Japan, and had basically gone into hiding since appearing on a UWFI show in March beating Kazuo Yamazaki. More than 200 reporters covering all the major mainstream non-sports magazines and newspapers that traditionally don't cover wrestling in Japan were at this show because of the story of Kiao making a sports comeback. Kiao did the job, getting knocked out in the 3rd round from a series of kicks to the head. An interesting undercard note is that in a tag match with Yuko Miyato and Masahito Kakihara versus Gary Albright and Mark Fleming, that Fleming started and was never able to tag out and finally submitted in 5-10, so Albright never entered the ring. Iron Sheik debuted on the undercard, and even though he's got the legit credentials from the 1968 Olympics in Greco-Roman wrestling, he's now in his 50s and had a terrible match submitting to Yoji Enjo in 4:54, and it is thought this would be both his first and last booking with the group. Results: October 9th, Querétaro AAA Kanai Uno and Mr. Condor and Attila Jr. B. Los Matematicos Dos and Trace and El Immortal, Cassandra and Vicky Carranza and La Olímpica B. Wendy and Pantera Serena and Martha Villalobos, Tony Arce and Vulcano and Rocco Valente B. Takeda and Mr. Magneto and Kendo Star, The Rose and Micro Rose and Fuerza Guerrera B. Misterioso and Micro Misterioso and Super Astro. October 9th, Arena Mexico in Mexico City, EMLL, Arcangel de la Muerte and Guerrero de la Muerte B. El Filoso and Talisman Jr., Oro and Cato Kung Lee Sr. B. Felino and Javier Cruz, Los Brazos B. The Infernales, Atlantis and King Haku and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. B. Jacques Mate and Massacre and Negro Casas, Black Magic B. Pierroth Jr. DQ. October 10th, Yakima, Washington, WWF 1900, Repo Man B. Jim Powers, Animal B. Double Trouble, Nails B. Big Boss Man, Max Moon B. Terry Taylor, Tatanka B. Mountie, IC title, British Bulldog B. Kimala. October 11th ago, New Japan 1680 sellout, Tokumitsu Ishizawa B. Yuji Nagata, Koji Kanemoto B. Satoshi Kojima, Masashi Aoyagi and Akatoshi Saito B. Black Cat and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto, Dean Malenko and Norio Onaga B. El Samurai and Kantaro Hoshino, Jushin Liger and Shinya Hashimoto B. Tatsutoshi Goto and Hiro Saito, Masachono and Osamu Kido B. Bam Bam Bigelow and Pegasus Kid, Kingo Kimura and Shiro Koshinaka B. Riki Chashu and Takayuki Izuka, Tatsumi Fujinami and Keiji Muto and Masa Saito B. Tony Halme and Tom Zink and Jim Neidhart, Tag Tourney, Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki B. Super Strong Machine and Scott Norton, Hazi Pin Machine Northern Lights Suplex 1107. October 16th, Bell, California, CLLP, Palomino Ramirez and Leopardo Negro B. Ponky Boy 2 and Cara Cortado, Rayo de Plata and Xander B. Hechicero I and Big Man Mixteco and Alcon Blanco B. Gory Chavez and Al Merida DQ, Tornado Negro 2 B. Superboy DQ, Cesar Sando Jr. and Chamaco Rebelde and Salvaje B. Piloto Nuclear and Mercurio and Superstar Jr. October 16th, Netzawal Coyote, UWA, Cassandra and Pimpinela Escarlata B. Los Royos Tapatios 1 and 2 2.5 stars, Silver King and El Texano B. Scorpio Jr. and Dr. Wagner Jr. 2 3/4 stars, Black Scorpio and Enrique Vera and Villano 3 B. Los Reyes Dominicanos and Buffalo Allen 2 stars, Mil Mascaras and Dos Cars B. Connect and The Killer. October 17th, Rome, Georgia in 100 Medieval Man D. Billy Ray, Chris Blade B. Mike Golden DQ, Tim Sledge B. Kenny Ardent Golden and Al Hornker Festus and New Jack, Dream Team B. Big O and The Psycho. October 17th, Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, IWA 300, Lil Chucky B. Butch Cassidy, Big Cheese B. Scott Summers, Ivan and Vladimir Koloff and Preston Steele and Scott Summers B. Thunderfeet and Cheese and Tracy Smothers, Steele B. Smothers, Vladimir Koloff 1 Battle Royal. October 18th, Mishitake, War 1000, Owen Hart B. Nobukazu Hirai, King Haku B. Yoshiro Ito, Ultimo Dragon B. Javier Cruz, Masao Orihara and Tatsumi Kitahara B. Great Kabuki and Pierroth Jr., Genichiro Tenryu and Takashi Ishikawa B. Berserker and Coco Ware. October 18th, Los Angeles, CILL, Leopardo Negro and Hitano B. Ponky Boy I and Mither, Superboy and Al Murrieta be Flash and Capitan Oro, Triton and Piloto Nuclear and El Clone Blanco be Los Verdugos of Guatemala and Gory Chavez. October 19, Hartford, Connecticut, WWF, 2500, Terry Taylor be Jim Powers 3/4 of a star, Crush be Mountie Dud, Tatanka be Repo Man 1 star, WWF title, Bret Hart be Nails 1 1/2 star, Virgil B. Skinner 1/2 of 1 star. Earthquake be IRS 1 1/4 stars, Ultimate Warrior be Ted DiBiase, sub for Flair, 1 star. October 19, Memphis, USWA, Howard Jeffrey Gaylord be Randy Rhoads, Jeff Jarrett be Doug Gilbert, Dirty White Boy be Mr. Hughes, Bill Dundee and Tom Pritchard be Black Hearts DQ, Ryan Christopher be Danny Davis to win GWF LTHWT title, USWA title, Todd Champion be Jerry Lawler, Lawler and Jarrett and Junkyard Dog DDQ King Killer and Moondogs. October 19, Isazaki, All Japan, 2400, Mighty Inoue be Pete Roberts, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momoto be Motoshi Okuma and Haruka Eigen and Ryuma Izumida, Dory Funk be Johnny Smith, Abdullah the Butcher and Giant Kimala 2 and Danny Spivey be Dan Crawford and Patriot and Andre the Giant, Toshiaki Kawada be Doug Furness, Stan Hansen and Johnny Ace be Steve Williams and Nigel Towers, Jumbo Tsuruta and Yoshinari Ogawa be Terry Gordy and Richard Slinger, Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi be Akira Tao and Masafuchi and Jun Akiyama, Kobashi pinned Akiyama 2502. October 20, Birmingham WCW 2,500/State Fair Free Grandstand Show, Rick Steamboat D. Steve Austin, Dustin Rhodes and Shane Douglas B. Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton, Sting b. Cactus Jack. October 20, Obihiro War 2300 Koko Ware b. Nobukazu Hirai, Masao Orihara and Tatsumi Kitahara b. Javier Cruz and Owen Hart, Berserker b. Yoshiro Ito, Takashi Ishikawa b. King Haku DQ, Benichiro Tenryu and Ultimo Dragon b. Pierroth Jr. and Great Kabuki. October 20, Miyazaki FMW 4608 Sellout, prelim results unavailable, Ricky Fuji b. Cowboy Billy Johnson, The Gladiator and Horace Boulder b. Great Punk and Tarzan Goto, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Sabu and Dr. Lucer be Atsushi Onita and Samba Asako. October 20, Toda, All Japan 2600, Mighty Inoue be Masao Inoue, Nigel Towers be Ryuma Izumida, Dory Funk and Patriot and Jun Akiyama be Dan Crawford and Doug Furness and Pete Roberts, Giant Baba and Andre the Giant and Rusher Kimura be Haruka Eigen and Motoshi Okuma and Masafuchi, Danny Spivey and Steve Williams be Giant Kimala 2 and Abdullah the Butcher, Toshiaki Kawada be Johnny Smith, Stan Hansen and Johnny Ace be Terry Gordy and Richard Slinger, Mitsuharu Misawa and Kenta Kobashi and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi be Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa, Misawa beat Ogawa Facelock 2257. October 20, Taneshi, All Japan Women 1750, Cynthia Moreno be Mimi Numata, Tag Tourney, Bat Yoshinaga and Tomoko Watanabe be Yumiko Hata and Suzuka Minami, Bull Nakano and Kyoko Inoue be Akira Hokuto and Mima Shimoda, Toshio Yamada be Takako Inoue, Manami Toyota and Debbie Malenko and Saki Hasegawa be Asia Kong and Miori Kamiya and Kwaro Ito. October 20, Louisville, USWA, Tony Anthony be Doug Gilbert, Ricky Morton be Blackheart No. 1, Black Hearts be Bill Dundee and Randy Rhoads, Danny Davis be Brian Christopher, USWA title, Todd Champion be Junkyard Dog, Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Lawler and Tom Pritchard be Moondogs and Richard Lee. October 20, Pachuca, UWA, Tarasco I and Macara be Luis Lopez Jr. and El Cinico, Spider be New Gree, Gran Hamada and Silver King and El Texano be Dr. Wagner Jr. and El Engendro and El Golpeador, UWA Lightweight title, Lasser be Ray Richard. October 21, Tokyo Budokan Hall, All Japan, 16,300 Sellout, Mitsuo Momoto and Masao Inoue be Takao Mori and Satoru Asako, Johnny Smith and Johnny Ace be Nigel Towers and Pete Roberts, Haruka Eigen and Motoshi Okuma and Masafuchi be Mighty Inoue and Ryuma Izumida and Rusher Kimura, Giant Kimala 2 and Abdullah the Butcher be Dan Crawford and Doug Furness, Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa be Tsuyoshi Kikuchi and Jun Akiyama, Steve Williams and Danny Spivey be Patriot and Kenta Kobashi, Jumbo Tsuruta and Andre the Giant and Terry Gordy be Dory Funk and Giant Baba and Stan Hansen. Triple Crown title, Mitsuharu Misawa be Toshiaki Kawada 2902 Tiger Suplex. October 21, Hamamatsu, New Japan, 4500, Osamu Nishimura and Hiroyoshi Yamamoto and Tsunemitsu Ishizawa and Yuji Nagata, Koji Kanemoto and Takeuki Izuka be Satoshi Kojima and Black Cat Norio Onagabe Dean Malenko, Super Strong Machine and Tatsutoshi Goto and Hiro Saito be Tony Halme and Pegasus Kid and Tom Zank, Masachono be Jim Neidhart, IWGP Junior title, El Samurai be Jushin Liger 1507 small package, tag tourney, Shinya Hashimoto and Riki Choshu be Tatsumi Fujinami and Minobu Nakanishi, Hashimoto pin Nakanishi Powerbomb 1154, tag tourney, Hiroshi Hazi and Kensuke Sasaki be Bam Bam Bigelow and Keiji Muto, Sasaki pin Bigelow German Suplex 1554, Tag Tournament Sudden Death Championship Match, Choshu and Hashimoto be Hazi and Sasaki, Choshu pin Sasaki Lariat 1545. October 21st Sapporo War, 3500, Javier Cruz be Nobukazu Hirai, Pierre Roth Jr. be Yuji Yasuoka, Takashi Ishikawa be Yoshiro Ito, King Haku be Koko Ware, Ultimo Dragon be Owen Hart, Great Kabuki be Berserker, Kengo Kimura and Shiro Koshinaka and Masashi Aoyagi be Genichiro Tenryu and Tatsumi Kitahara and Masao Orihara. October 21st Oita FMW 3534 sellout. Prelim results unavailable. The Gladiator be Great Punk, Yukari Maedamari and Combat Toyota be Miwasato and Megumi Kudo, Riki Fuji and Tarzan Goto be Cowboy Billy Johnson and Dr. Lucer. No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Deathmatch, Sabu and Horace Boulder be Atsushi Onita and Samba Asako. October 21st Miyako, All Japan Women. Prelim results unavailable. Debbie Malenko and Miori Kamiya be Bat Yoshinaga and Tomoko Watanabe, Manami Toyota and Tashio Yamada be Akira Hokuto and Mima Shimoda, Kyoko Inoue be Takako Inoue, Asia Kong and Kaoru Ito and Saki Hasegawa be Bull Nakano and Yumiko Hata and Suzuka Minami. October 21st Indianapolis, WCW 600 total / kids free with paid adult. Eric Watts be Diamond Dallas Page 1/2 of 1 star, Van Hammer be Vinny Vegas 1 star, Tony Atlas and Barbarian be Marcus Bagwell and Robbie Walker 1 1/2 star, Brian Pillman be Brad Armstrong 1 1/2 star, Rick Steamboat and Dustin Rhodes and Shane Douglas be Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton and Steve Austin 2 1/2 stars, Lumberjack match, Sting be Cactus Jack 2 1/2 stars, US title, Rick Rude be Nikita Koloff 3 stars, Lights Out match, Sting be Jake Roberts 2 1/2 stars. October 22nd Cincinnati, WCW 900. Eric Watts be Diamond Dallas Page, Kensuke Sasaki be Marcus Bagwell, Van Hammer be Vinny Vegas, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin be Shane Douglas and Brad Armstrong, Barbarian be Rick Steamboat, Masachono be Arnold Anderson. Elimination tag match, Sting and Nikita Koloff and Dustin Rhodes be Rick Rude, and Cactus Jack and Jake Roberts. October 22nd Tampa Iowa 125, Tim Steele be King Charlie, Kid Dragon be Lazartron, Not Hector Guerrero, Tommy Starr be Bill Payne, Southern Posse and Mickey J be Lone Riders and Frankie Rose, Loser leaves town, Cuban Assassin be Jimmy Backlund, Lou Perez be Mark Starr to win Iowa LTHWT title. October 22nd Kabubunji FMW 2228 sellout, prelim results unavailable, Chain Death Match, Dr. Lucer be Samba Asako, Great Punk and Tarzan Goto be Cowboy Billy Johnson and Sabu, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Deathmatch, Horace Boulder and the Gladiator be Atsushi Onita and Riki Fuji. October 23rd Calgary, IWA 100, Brett Como D. Steve Gillespie, Jake Steele be Jason Helton, Bill Joden and Shane Croft be US Express DQ, Jerry Morrow be PJ Walker, Biff Wellington DDQ Chris Jericho. October 23rd Pittsburgh WWF 5300, Jim Powers be Barry Horowitz 1 1/4 stars, Tito Santana be Skinner 1/2 of 1 star. IC title, British Bulldog be Shawn Michaels 2 stars, WWF tag title, Natural Disasters be Ted DiBiase and IRS Corps, Virgil be Terry Taylor 3/4 of a star, Bob Backlund be Nails 1 star, Razor Ramon be Randy Savage Corps 1 1/2 star. October 23rd Denver WWF 3750, Max Moon be Genius Dud, Jim Duggan be Brooklyn Brawler 2 stars, Crush be Repo Man Dud, Ultimate Warrior be Kimala 1 1/2 star, Beverly Brothers be Bushwhackers Dud, Tatanka be Rick Martel DQ 2 stars, WWF title, Bret Hart be Papa Shango 1 star. October 23rd Tokyo Budokan Hall, UWFI, 16,500 sellout, Kickboxing, Kunpon Jihai Samuri Thailand be Makoto Oi, Hiromitsu Kanehara be Tom Burton, Yoshihiro Takayama be Mark Silver, Yoji Anjo be Khosrau Iron Sheik Vaziri, Masahito Kakihara and Yuko Miyato be Gary Albright and Mark Fleming, Kiyoshi Tamura be Kazuo Yamazaki, Nobuhiko Kata be Koji Kiao knockout, 46 of 3rd round. October 23, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, War, 2,200 sellout Nobukazu Hirai b Yuji Yasuoka, Owen Hart b Javier Cruz, Akatoshi Saito b Masao Orihara, Ultimo Dragon b Pierroth Jr., King Haku b Yoshiro Ito, Takashi Ishikawa b Berserker DQ Great Kabuki b Koko Ware, Genichiro Tenryu and Tatsumi Kitahara b Shiro Koshinaka and Kengo Kimura. October 23, Belmont, North Carolina, PWF, 100 Gentleman James b Scotty McKeever, Flaming Youth b Cruel Connection No. 2, George South b Star Rider, Italian Stallion b Austin Steele. October 23, Bell, California, CLLP, 200 Cara Mercado b Palomino Ramirez, Xander b Big Man Thunder Machine and Trash Master b Bobby and Wayne Bradley, El Marietta and Gory Chavez b Alcon Blanco and Leopardo Negro, Mercurio and Superstar Jr. and Piloto Nuclear b Chamaco Rebelde and El Salvaje and Cesar Sando Jr. October 23, Cumming, Georgia, All South, 96, T.A. Golden b Glenn Gilbernetti, Joey Maggs b Medieval Man, Jailhouse Rocker b Rodney Cowan, Lee Thomas and Scott Stud b Ex-Convicts DQ, Ray Candyker Goldman, Tommy Rich b Steve Lawler DQ. October 23, Dallas Sportatorium, GWF, 2,725/virtually all paper, Big John Hawk b Dusty Wolf, Chaz Taylor b The Animal, Francis Buxton b GQ Knight, Rainbow Brown b Kit Carson, Mike Dahl b Alex Porto to win GWF LTHWT title, Mike Lane b Manny Villalobos, Steve Dull d Rude Dog, Steve Simpson b Mike Davis DQ, Rod Price b Hawk, Taylor b Killer Brooks DQ, Manny Fernandez b Calvin Knapp, Black Bart and Johnny Mantel b Ebony Experience to win GWF tag team titles. October 23, Cleveland, WCW 800, Van Hammer and Eric Watts b Diamond, Dallas Page and Vinny Vegas, Tony Ellis b Robbie Walker, Barbarian b Marcus Bagwell, Brian Pillman and Steve Austin b Brad Armstrong and Shane Douglas, Kensuke Sasaki b Arnold Anderson, Masachono b Bobby Eaton, Elimination Tag Match, Rick Rude and Cactus Jack and Jake Roberts b Sting and Dustin Rhodes and Rick Steamboat. October 23, Cuernavaca, AAA, Mascarita Sagrada and Octagonchito and Angelito Azteca b El Picudito and Jurito Estrada and Espectrito 2 3/4 stars, Rey Mysterio Jr. and El Hijo del Santo and Octagon b El Psicopata, Mondo Guerrero, and Tony Arce and Volcano DQ 3 stars, Pero Arguello and Liz Mark and Mascara Sagrada b Cien Caras and Chavo Guerrero and El Cico de Ligo DQ 1 1/2 star. October 23, Winter Haven, Florida, CFWF Al Hardiman Promoter, Chris Nelson b Tim Driggers DQ, Cody Wade d Big V, Randy the Hulk Hogan b Buddy the Hammer Valentine, Tyree Pride and Caribbean Kid Berdodker Mark Star and Cuban Assassin, Lou Perez b John Force, Al Hardiman b Rico Federico DQ. October 24, Johnson City, Tennessee, SMW 300 Jimmy Golden b Robbie Eagle 1/4 star, Tracy Smothers b Killer Kyle 1 1/2 star, Night Stalker b Joey Maggs 1 1/2 star, Ron Garvin b Paul Orndorff 2 1/4 stars, SMW title, Dirty White Boydker Tim Horner 2 1/2 stars, Rock and Roll Express b Stan Lane and Tom Pritchard 3 1/2 stars. October 24, Philadelphia, ECW, 225, Rockin' Rebel b Cowboy Cody, ECW tag title, Super Destroyers b Cream Team, Rip Sawyer and Dave Casanova, chain match, Tommy Cairo b Ivan Koloff, Jimmy Janetti and Larry Winters DDQ Chris Michaels and Damian Stone, ECW title, Don Morocco b Jimmy Snuka, Tony Stetson Johnny Hotbody, Kodiak Bear and Wolfman b Hellriders, Glenn Osborne b Max Thrasher DQ, JT Smith and Tigra b Mr. Sandman and Peaches. October 24, Clementon, New Jersey, WWA, 225, AC Golden D Chris Evans, Victor Rivera Jr. b Ed the Razor, Boy Gone Bad b Lord of Darkness Pain, Adila Singh and Bobby Salsa b Chris Candido and Ray Odyssey, Spider b Tank DQ. October 24, Elka, North Carolina, PWF, 150, Austin Steele b Gentleman James, Cruel Connection No. 2 b Star Rider, George South b Flaming Youth, Italian Stallion b Outlaw Scotty McKeever 1 Battle Royal. October 24, Tampa, WWA/Iqua, Mickey J b Stormtrooper, Sonny T b Buck Quartermain, Jimmy Backlund b Navy SEAL, Gary Nice b Mark Star DQ, Lou Perez Rico Federico. October 24, Chatsworth, Georgia, MWF, Young Stallion b Mike Badness, Greg Sawyer b Randy Steele, Vic Rose b New Centurion DQ, Party Boys b Mr. Knoxville and Centurion, Larry Santana b Hurricane Willie. October 25, Dallas, Big D 65, Ray Evans D. Action Jackson, Gary Young B. Mike Dull, Tony Adams B. Tasha Simone Love, Southern Rebel, Kevin Lawler, B. Big D. DQ, Terry Sims B. Scott Braddock, Eric Embry and Chris Adams DDQ Iceman King Parsons and Rod Price. October 25, Columbia, Missouri, WWF, 2500 Jim Powers B. Brooklyn Brawler, Tito Santana B. Skinner, Razor Ramon B. Randy Savage Core WWF Tag Title, Money Incorporated B. Natural Disasters, Virgil B. Terry Taylor, Big Boss Man B. Nails, IC Title, British Bulldog B. Papa Shango. October 25, Port Royal, Pennsylvania, WIN, Zach Blades B. Ramblin' Rich, Tommy Rose B. Morgus the Maniac Corps, Ricky Blues B. Watsumi the Rising Sun, Nikolai Volkov B. Axel Rotten, AC Golden B. Mario Savoldi, Bunkhouse Match, Cream Team B. Payne and Spider. October 26, Springfield, Illinois, WWF Challenge Taping, VOR 500 thirds, 300 paid, non-squash results, Nails B. Big Boss Man 1 1/2 star, Tito Santana B. Damian Demento, Mondo Clean DQ Dud, Tatanka B. Repo Man 1 1/2 star, Earthquake B. IRS DQ 1 1/2 star, Terry Taylor D. Lance Cassidy 1 3/4 stars, WWF title, Bret Hart B. Mountie, 30 dud, Virgil B. Bam Bam Bigelow DQ dud, Bob Backlund B. Skinner 1 1/4 stars, Beverly Brothers B. Jim Powers and Jim Brunzel 1 1/2 star, Razor Ramon B. Randy Savage Core 2 1/2 stars, WWF title, Hart B. Papa Shango 1 3/4 stars, Ultimate Warrior B. Nails, sub for Ric Flair, dud. Special thanks to Dan Riley, Tim Whitehead, Ron Lemieux, Steve Sims, Larry Doyle, Freddie Fargo, Michael Cannon, John Lawson, Kurt Brown, Mike Boris, Paul Adamovic, George Reed. AAA. CN Cars, who has been the top singles hill first for EMLL and of late for this group for many years, turned babyface at the television tapings on October 23 in Cuernavaca. Cars teamed with El Cico Delico and Chavo Guerrero against Lizmark and Pero Oguayo and Mascara Sagrada. Guerrero was disqualified to lose the match for his team in straight falls for using a piledriver, forbidden in Mexico, on Lizmark. Caras got mad at Guerrero for costing his team the match and started yelling at him. Guerrero started yelling back and soon they were brawling amongst themselves when Cico Delico sided with Guerrero to make it 2-on-1. The fans started yelling for Aguayo, who has a long feud with Caras, to save Caras and finally he cleaned house, and then walked away, leaving Caras in the ring. Guerrero and Cico Delico came back out and attacked Caras again and Aguayo made a second save and this time they jumped Aguayo as well. Midgets will be back on television this coming Sunday. EMLL. Scheduled to appear on the October 31st card at Cal State Los Angeles Gym will be Canadian Vampire Casanova, Atlantis, Los Villanos, Dandy, Brazo de Oro and Brazo de Plata. Plus there was a lot of talk that Terry Funk would make a surprise appearance at the show. The return date will be November 14th with no name signed, although the WWA contract with the college expires after this card. This group lost its good television time slot and may be off television completely in Mexico City, which would give AAA a huge edge in the promotional feud. To show how deep the feud has gotten, when AAA held a television taping on October 23 in Cuernavaca, this group scheduled cards in the same city on both October 20th and October 22nd to burn the town out and hopefully hurt AAA's television crowd. Empty seats on TV would give the impression to the fans that AAA is hurting. October 20th they headlined with Bestia Salvaje keeping his CMLL middleweight title, beating Dandy, plus had a 4-team tag team tournament. 2 nights later they brought in Vampire and Rayo de Jalisco Jr. versus Black Magic and Pirata Morgan on top. Pierroth Jr., Ultimo Dragon and Javier Cruz were on tour of Japan for War this week. Vampire was suspended from November 9th to November 23rd for no showing his October 18th booking in Villahermosa. He would have been suspended immediately except the office has booked him to out-of-area promoters who would have been really upset at having to pull him off advertised shows since he's probably the biggest draw in the country right now. The suspension does eliminate Vampire from the CMLL World Heavyweight Title Tournament, which starts October 30th but doesn't end until November 13th. Caos of UWA is being loaned, with the story being he's the UWA representative in the Heavyweight Title Tournament. Arena Mexico main event on October 23rd was Vampire and Atlantis and Dandy versus Magic and La Fiera and Satanico, while the October 25th Arena Mexico show had Los Brazos versus Negro Casas and Magic and Satanico. Just had a chance to see midget rookie wrestler Saigoncito Dragon, and he's tremendous for a rookie. Green in spots of course, but incredible potential. Fabuloso Blondie, Ken Tims, returned on October 11th but this time came in with his head shaved. Love Machine lost another match with CMLL middleweight champ Bestia Salvaje on October 7 and now Kalpan in what was said to have been Super UWA. Lineup for October 25 at El Toreo in Now Kalpan had Black Scorpio vs Scorpio Jr. in a mask vs mask match and connect back as a babyface for the billionth time with Dos Caras and Villano 3 vs Tori Infernal, Rochester Roadblock, and El Signo and Negro Navarro. Karloff Lagarde Jr. and Rene Guajardo Jr., the sons of probably the most famous tag team in Mexican history, were scheduled to debut on the show, teaming with Killer against Gran Hamada and Sato, Sakigaki Gantetsu, and El Coloso. Connect had a UWA heavyweight title match on October 26 in Puebla against Infernal, stemming from an October 19 match in the same city where the two were on opposite sides in a trios match, and Infernal pinned Connect to win both the first and second fall. Villano V defended his UWA light heavyweight title against Loco Zandokan October 27 in Querétaro. Lasser retained his UWA lightweight title, beating Ray Richard on October 20 in Pachuca. All Japan. In the tag team tournament, it was announced that Al Perez wouldn't be coming in and that Dory Funk would instead team up with Tsuyoshi Kikuchi. The Eagle that will team with the Patriot in the tournament is Jackie Fulton. TV ratings for the October 18 show were a 4.8. All Japan had a TV special that aired on October 10 with Giant Baba vs. Gene Kiniski from 1967 and Terry Funk vs. Jumbo Tsuruta from 1976 that drew an 0.7 rating. New Japan. They're going to shoot a big angle on November 9 in Fridley, Minnesota to lead to the debut of Road Warrior Hawk at Tokyo Sumo Hall on November 22 and November 23. The card hasn't been announced, but should become official this week, but both shows are scheduled to include Rick and Scott Steiner, Sting, and maybe even Genichiro Tenryu. The biggest angle on October 21 in Hamamatsu, after El Samurai pinned Jushin Liger with a small package to keep the IWGP Junior Heavyweight title, Liger grabbed the house mic and pointed to Naoki Sano, who Liger had an incredible series of matches with 3 years ago, who was in the crowd in a suit and tie, and Liger pointed him out and challenged him. Sano came to ringside and told Liger he wasn't a junior heavyweight anymore and he doesn't want to wrestle him, but wants to wrestle either Masachono or Keiji Muto and win the World Heavyweight title. Kensuke Sasaki will miss the November tour as he's going to stay in the US for WCW. Minobu Nakanishi is also staying in the US but won't be wrestling, as he'll be in Minnesota training with Brad Rheingans and won't return until the Tokyo Dome show on January 4. Originally the plan was for Nakanishi to debut at the Dome show, however they moved his debut up a few months because they needed something to create interest in the tag team tournament when Big Van Vader pulled out at the last minute. Vader may be through here. There are a lot of contractual problems stemming from Vader's knee injury. Vader works on a guaranteed annual salary believed to have been in the $200,000 range, rather than on a per-week deal. When Vader injured his knee in Japan, the office was going to pay for his operation, but he worked WCW dates before getting the operation and held off on the operation until right after the September Clash. New Japan basically demanded he get the operation at that point because they wanted to make sure he was ready for the tournament. His knee didn't respond as quick as expected and he canceled the tourney, and New Japan wants to take $30,000 off the salary for missing the tournament because their side is that they wanted him to get the operation sooner and not work all the WCW dates so he wouldn't miss the tournament. I'd figure his side is that he suffered the injury in Japan, got the operation in what was figured to be enough time to make the tour, but the knee didn't come back fast enough. With Vader and Bigelow gone, New Japan is going to make a big play to get the Steiners as regulars in 1993 and make them, along with Hawk, Ron Powers, Scott Norton and Tony Halme, as the top foreigners for the group. Other Japan notes. War sold out Korakuen Hall on October 23 for a New Japan vs. War tag match where Genichiro Tenryu and Tatsumi Kitahara beat Shiro Koshinaka and Kengo Kimura. Takashi Ishikawa interfered and caused Koshinaka to get pinned. The match was being taped by TV Asahi to appear as part of the New Japan TV show with Masa Saito doing the color. Saito was so mad about the outside interference that he climbed into the ring and challenged Tenryu to show up at Sumo Hall on November 22 and November 23. 2 nights earlier, a 6-man mixed match with Tenryu and Kitahara teaming with Masao Orihara against Koshinaka, Ainmura and Masashi Aoyagi ended with the New Japan group winning due to interference from Akitoshi Saito. Saito knocked out War rookie Nobukazu Hirai, who was watching the match from ringside. Tenryu jumped out after Saito giving New Japan a 3-on-2 edge and Koshinaka pinned Orihara. The mixed match drew 3,500 fans. Also on the card was what would have been a dream match at some point where Ultimo Dragon pinned Owen Hart. Next War Tour is November 26th to December 1st, with Berserker and Double Trouble being sent by WWF, which spares nothing in giving War the best talent available. FMW continues to draw big crowds for the barbed wire matches on this tour. Onita announced that his tag partner for the tournament will be Shoji Nakagawa, a former author who is a prelim wrestler, but it's all an angle. Nakagawa actually quit FMW and has already signed up with Wings, FMW's arch rival, and was scheduled to start on October 24th. Before the fans knew about this, Onita announced he was picking Nakagawa to be his tag partner in the tournament. When Nakagawa went public saying he was leaving, Onita claimed it was because he didn't have the guts to do street fight main events every night and blasted the guy. Tarzan Goto will break up his team with Onita most likely so they can feud once again, since Goto and Big Titan look to be the most likely winners of the tag team tournament. Wing from December 9th to December 20th has Mr. Pogo, Kim Duke, Miguelito Perez, Leatherface, Mike Kirchner, Freddy Krueger, The Grappler, Lynn Denton, Jason the Terrible, and Crush the Terminator. UWFI booked a December 20th date at Tokyo Sumo Hall. Tomoko Watanabe won the All Japan Women Japanese title from Saki Hasegawa on October 9th in Chiba. Shunji Takano's new promotion, the 16th office in Tokyo, will be called Power Wrestling Connection, PWC. Japanese Television Rundown. October 11th, All Japan. 1. Kiuchi and Kena Kobashi kept the Asian tag titles, beating Dan Crawford and Doug Furnas. They only aired the last 5 minutes of this match, but it was incredible. Crawford and Furnas did a lot of new high spots. The match consisted of one super move after another with super crowd heat, before Kobashi pinned Furnas with a moonsault. If the whole match was this good, it probably would be a 5-star match. What aired was as good if not better than the Hazy and Sasaki vs. Steiner's match that aired on New Japan TV the week before. 4.5 stars. 2. Mitsuharu Misawa and Toshiaki Kawada beat Johnny Ace and Stan Hansen when Misawa pinned Ace after a Tiger Driver, double arm suplex dropped into powerbomb. Another good fast-paced match with one big move after another. 3.25 stars. 3. Jumbo Tsuruta and Akira Tao retained the PWF World Tag titles, beating Terry Gordy and Steve Williams in 25 minutes. This was even better than their typical match. It should be noted that Baba never recognized Gordy and Williams as either NWA or WCW Tag Team Champions. First 17 minutes were better work than usual, and then they went to all the hot moves and near falls, including many new spots and kicking out of near falls that looked like the finish, including everyone using their regular finishers. Gordy kicked out of Tao's golden arm bomber a few times before Gordy went for a clothesline. Tao blocked it, and Tao gave him a third arm bomber for the pin. It was a big upset because Tao had never pinned Gordy before. This was one of the best television shows of the year. 4.5 stars. USWA. Todd Champion is the new USWA champ. It was announced in Memphis that he had won the title on October 17th in Cleveland from Butch Reed in a match that never took place. Best guess is that Reed, who won the title on October 12th in Memphis, simply wouldn't come back given the legendary pay scale here. In Louisville, where they run most of the same matches and angles 1 week behind, the Junkyard Dog title defense against Reed, scheduled for October 20th, turned into Dog defending against Champion, with Champion winning. Champion arrived with the belt for the October 19th show in Memphis and beat Jerry Lawler due to outside interference from manager Burt Prentice. Brian Christopher regained the GWF Light Heavyweight title from Danny Davis on the October 12th Memphis show in the match where Christopher wore the chicken suit. Davis was laughing so hard at Christopher that Christopher managed to sneak a pin on him. Eddie Gilbert returned, this time as a babyface. It started at a house show last week where the Moondogs jumped Doug Gilbert early in the card. The main event was scheduled as Lawler and Jeff Jarrett and JYD against Moondogs and Richard Lee, but JYD no-showed. Doug Gilbert came out and asked Lawler and Jarrett if he could replace JYD, and they let him. However, the Dogs destroyed Doug. Eddie came out on television Saturday vowing revenge for his brother. Later in the show, as Lawler was doing an interview, the Dogs and Champion jumped him and Eddie made the save using a fire extinguisher. No WWF wrestlers on the show for the second week in a row on October 26th. WWF was doing taping that night, so they may account for it, but if nobody is on the show next week, I'd guess that the relationship is changing or on the rocks. October 26th has Dirty White Girl vs. Miss Texas. Black Hearts, who will no-show since they've already left the territory, versus Bill Dundee and Bart Sawyer. Christopher vs. Davis in a loser leaves town match. Jarrett vs. Moondog spot. Eddie Gilbert vs. Spike. Champion vs. Lawler for the USWA title, and Lawler and Gilbert and Jarrett vs. Moondogs and King Killer, who may beat Doug Gilbert.
Davis and Christopher had a television match in which the loser would have 10 eggs broken over his head.
Davis won and broke one egg over Christopher's head and gave the other 11 eggs to 11 fans who did the honors. This led to Christopher demanding the loser leaves town match. The underneath guys here are said to be earning less than $200 per week, which explains why most don't last very long. Lawler and Jarrett were said to have had an incredible match with the Moondogs on October 21st in Evansville, Indiana, in the 4.5 stars range. However, the show only drew about 140 fans, which is one of the lowest Evansville crowds and would be only around a $700 house. SMW. Only one house show this past weekend on October 24th in Johnson City, which drew about 300, and this weekend there are no house shows.
Tracy Smothers debuted on television this weekend doing an interview saying that he'd been in WCW for 2.5 years and the guys in the office told him that the Southern boy image wasn't any good for a national promotion and told him to say he's from Wyoming, and he said he's never even been to Wyoming. He blamed his heel turn on the fans in the North booing him and said he got frustrated and started breaking the rules, and said that Bob Armstrong called and said he was like a fifth son to him and to get his head on straight and get on the right path, and said he wants to be known as Southern boy Tracy Smothers again. Dirty White Boy and Ron Wright were doing an interview when Tim Horner came out, and when Horner showed up, White Boy ran pushing Wright in his wheelchair to the dressing room in front of him. Bob Armstrong came out and talked with Night Stalker, 6-7, and Malachi the Grim Reaper, a 6-8 guy from Pittsburgh, who had a letter from the Master, Kevin Sullivan. The Master agreed to appear on television under 2 conditions. First, Brian Lee has to wrestle Night Stalker and beat him. Second, Lee has to meet him face to face. Stalker and Reaper then pulled out a tombstone with Lee's name on it.
Since Lee will be appearing regularly in Japan for Oriental Pro, he'll be in and out of here.
The TV main event was scheduled to be the tag team title match, with Heavenly Bodies defending against Rock and Roll Express since Rock and Roll insulted Jim Cornette's mother. They tried to stall with the story that Robert Gibson's mother had surgery, and Morton asked Bob Armstrong to postpone the match until next week. Cornette came out and said the contract was for this week, and this was the only week they could get a title match. Finally, Morton agreed to go in for a handicap match against both of them after Cornette called Ricky's father a drunk. Morton was double-teamed and juiced really bad until Gibson showed up in street clothes, but Killer Kyle ran in as well, and the Express was left in the ring destroyed. They announced Danny Davis was injured, which is why he's full-time in USWA, due to Orndorff's piledriver. Orndorff had a TV match against Dixie Dynamite, which ended with Ron Garvin coming out wearing Orndorff's robe, and Orndorff chased him and lost the match via countout. Texas. 2 title changes on October 23rd at the Sportatorium. First, Mike Dull beat Alex Porto to win the light heavyweight title, and the Rough Riders, Black Bart and Johnny Mantell, beat the Ebony Experience to win the tag team titles. The Experience is about to break up because both are after the same girl named Delilah, who is telling each one that they're the one she really loves. Steve Dahl returned. Chaz Taylor juiced like crazy in a match with Killer Brooks when Manny Fernandez interfered. Manny Villalobos ripped up Skander Akbar's Iraqi flag. Doyle King announced they were negotiating to bring back Kerry Von Erich, which got no crowd reaction except for groans. The group is running spot shows on November 7th and November 14th. Fernandez, who is suspended, was allowed to appear because he claimed his mother was flying in from Mexico this week to watch him wrestle. After the match, new Commissioner Randolph asked Fernandez where his mother was, and Fernandez couldn't find her, and Randolph suspended Fernandez for 1 year. The reason for the title changes is because Porto and Ebony Experience started Monday for Now in Japan, which is the same reason for Fernandez's suspension since he's on the same tour. October 30th has a bunkhouse battle royal, Al Perez vs. Brooks, Rod Price vs. Patriot for the North American title, Rough Riders vs. Bobby Duncombe Jr. and John Hawk, and Brody Powers vs. Maniac Mike. Chris and Tony Adams appeared on the October 25th Big D show, which drew about 65 fans going head-to-head with Halloween Havoc on pay-per-view. Chris teamed with Eric Embry on top to go to a double disqualification with King Parsons and Rod Price. Another newcomer was the Southern Rebel, Kevin Lawler, Jerry's second oldest son, who works as Ref Kevin Christian in Memphis, as Mid-South Light Heavyweight Champion. Also coming as will be JC Ice Baby, Jamie Dundee, Bill's son. Here and there. Rod Price will be working a show on November 21st at Santa Margarita High School in Lake Forest, California, as a benefit for the school's wrestling team. The Calgary weekly cards are drawing about 100 per Friday night. Steve DeSalvo isn't involved in the operation because he's spending too much time in his insurance business, so Ed Langley and Biff Wellington are running things. Rich Frisk's October 24th card in Tracy, California was canceled due to a poor advance.
Todd Gordon's ECW at the Chestnut Cabaret in Philadelphia on October 24 was headlined by Don Muraco pinning Jimmy Snuka.
After the match, Snuka turned heel on Gordon, giving him 2 backbreakers, a knee drop, and then attacking a ref, the ring announcer, the timekeeper, and beating up on half of the babyfaces.
Next show is November 17 with Muraco vs. The Sandman, Tommy Cairo vs. Sal Balomo, Snuka vs. Tony Stetson. Dennis Corraluzzo's WWA ran the same night with the headline being Boy Gone Bad, Joe Daniels turning face. After the Tank, a newcomer, was disqualified against the Spider, Bad's manager Amy Lee tried to sign Tank to a contract and Tank clotheslined her and was beating on her until Bad made the save. Kevin Von Erich quote of the week.
In a Man on the Street interview in the St. Louis-based Riverfront Times, the question asked was, what are the essential ingredients for good sex?
Kevin, who listed his occupation as pro wrestler and catfish cleaner, responded, I need a spotter and lots of extras, some key stunt personnel, maybe a pulley on the ceiling and a good strong bungee cord. That's great sex, not just good sex. George South's PWF is running a few shows weekly using himself as junior heavyweight champion and Italian Stallion as heavyweight champ in the Carolinas.
Stallion's main opponent, Mark Canterbury, has left for WCW, so they are using a newcomer named Austin Steele doing a Ric Flair gimmick, managed by South as Stallion's heel foe.
Stallion and South also do Just Say No speeches to kids, with Stallion giving the speeches and South coming out as a heel to interrupt and tell Stallion that the kids don't care about what he's saying. Win on November 15 in Dundalk, Maryland has a tourney for the Win Tag title with Cream Team, Rip Sawyer and Dave Casanova. Lords of Darkness, Beauty and Beast, Adrian Hall and Morgus the Maniac, Lethal Weapons, Tommy Rose and Johnny Rotten, and one more. Also Nikolai Volkov and AC Golden vs. Don Muraco and Axel Rotten, Ricky Blues vs. Lightning Kid and Ivan Koloff vs. Lucifer. WWF.
Bam Bam Bigelow started as a heel at television on October 26 in Springfield, Illinois, losing via DQ to Virgil and beating Joey Maggs. The only other newcomer who came out for an interview wearing a suit and tie was Jimmy Garvin.
Garvin was also a heel and predicted all the heels to win at Survivors and bad-mouthed Warrior and Savage. Told the segment was pretty bad. They were taping more competitive matches both due to November sweeps and an attempt to up the primetime ratings. The only angle of the show was Rick Martel continued to beat up on a jobber after winning his match, and Bob Backlund did a run-in and gave Martel an atomic drop. Backlund got little response. Building was only half full, with about 1,200 of that being paper, so they had to move people around to get the side facing the cameras to look full. Expect Bigelow and Yokozuna to get big pushes, probably to be groomed for Hart in 1993.
First major post-WM show is November 28 at Madison Square Garden with Warrior vs. Nails, Bulldog vs. Kimala, Backlund vs. Mountie, and Money Incorporated vs. Nasty Boys as the top 4 matches. December cards are kind of a mixed bag underneath. The 2 headline matches look to be Warrior vs. Nails or Ramon and Hart vs. Flair, while the other major post-Survivors program's top matches are Undertaker vs. Ramon or Nails, Nasty Boys vs. Money Incorporated, Marty Jannetty vs. Shawn Michaels, Backlund vs. Shango or Martel,
Bulldog vs. Kimala, Crush vs. Berserker or Repo Man. The undercards are slightly deeper than at present, but the headline matches don't look any more capable of drawing than what they presented these past few months that didn't draw. Notable by their absence on those shows are Savage and Bossman. While I'm told no deal is made, word I'm getting is it's better than 50-50 that Hulk Hogan will be back in early 1993. Latest tentative plan for 1993 WrestleMania is to be in Las Vegas.
Don't expect any major push for Terry Taylor, as he's already doing jobs in prelims for Max Moon and Virgil, and going to draws with Lance Cassidy. Reports from the house shows are that there is no difference in the quality of shows with this supposed new philosophy. In fact, for the past 2 weeks, reports in most cases are that the shows have been among the worst. Warrior worked this past weekend with Kimala replacing Flair as his opponent. Flair was in Chicago on Saturday to make an appearance, but was still hospitalized on Friday, so missed Denver. No signs were posted in Denver, although an announcement was made and refunds were offered. Money Incorporated were billed as tag champs at the arenas this past weekend, even though the title change won't air on television until Saturday. There will be a lot more European dates booked in 1993, which only makes sense. They announced both Hart vs. Michaels and Bulldog vs. Mountie in singles titles matches for Survivors. The last European tour saw them run 9 shows and draw $2,435,165. If you think there's some dirty dealings in the wrestling industry, you should.
Investigate the bodybuilding supplement industry. The newsletter Sport Supplements Buyer's Guide that was quoted last week with the negative review of IcoPro appears to be something of fraud itself. Although listed as Volume 2, Issue 3, and based out of New York City, with a bogus address according to our own checking, it was apparently an initial issue sent out of Syracuse, with articles written by doctors and dietitians who don't seem to exist. Although Titan hasn't responded, other supplements that were panned a whole lot worse and have sent out letters claiming it was a hoax, but their rhetoric is transparent as well, such as this letter from Bill Phillips who defended MetRx, which the newsletter ripped. There is one thing that I'm going to ask of you.
Actually, it's a way for you to get back at the scumbag who is trying not only to damage me, but pull one over on you. What you can do to really piss this guy off is help me spread the good word about Muscle Media 2000, the magazine he publishes, and MetRx.
Yes, that's exactly the opposite of what this scoundrel wants you to do. If enough people feel as strongly about being lied to as I do, and do something about it, this plan could blow up right in this guy's face. Wouldn't that be great? I'm not going to cover bodybuilding here since McMahon's has mainly pulled out, although he is still pushing the supplements on wrestling, so there are ties to the wrestling industry. McMahon is doing his own fake propaganda about how his supplement is responsible for the physiques of his wrestlers on the wrestling shows, but that entire industry is built on con men and fraudulent advertising. WCW. A satellite television press conference with Jake Roberts took place to plug havoc that made many television sports reports around the country. The funniest thing is that Roberts was talking very openly with no knowledge that it was going up on satellite like an hour before it was supposed to start, and somebody found out and immediately put music over the voices, but it was audible at one point, his complaining about the lack of medical coverage. The October 31st card in Chicago is reducing kids' tickets to 66 cents. If they don't draw a huge increase in attendance, it'll show conclusively price is not an issue. WCW on Saturday was one depressing television show. King of Cable tournament will start on November 7th, during a 2-hour, 45-minute show, with Sting vs. Brian Pillman and Barry Windham vs. Rick Rude. On November 14th, with a 2:30 show, they'll have Jake Roberts vs. Dustin Rhodes and Tony Atlas vs. Big Van Vader. Semifinals and finals take place at the November 18th Clash. Masa Chono and Kensuke Sasaki were in a few days before Havoc, with Chono beating Arnold Anderson and Bobby Eaton, and Sasaki also beating Anderson. There was no mention at all of Scott Steiner, Rick Steiner, or the TV title either on television or the pay-per-view, so that has to be pretty much a company admission that they are gone barring a late miracle. WCW ran a really hot show as part of the Alabama State Fair on Tuesday night with 3 matches lasting a little over 1 hour: Steamboat vs. Austin, Anderson and Eaton vs. Douglas, and Rhodes and Sting vs. Cactus Jack. Jim Ross was reprimanded by WSB Radio having to do with a remark made during the 49ers-Falcons game. Ross made what was reported as an offhand remark about gay people late in the game. It was an inappropriate remark and certainly not the direction we want to go, said WSB Radio VP and GM Mark Morgan in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on Saturday. We've talked to him about it. He has apologized, and we're certain it won't happen again. Morgan emphasized the other 2 Falcon announcers, Phil Rasinski and Jeff Van Note, were not part of the conversation. The readers' pages. Kelly Crow of P.O. Box 2642, Renton, Washington 98056 is looking for a tape of Game 7 of the 1992 National League Championship Series and a tape of the Rams-Giants game from a few weeks ago. John Staunch of P.O. Box 472, Bayonne, New Jersey 07002 is looking for a tape of the Howard Stern pay-per-view special, What's UWF Tapes? Photos of Sensational Sherry and a weekly supplier of the Jim Ross Radio Show. Don Rowlett of the National Wrestling Collectors Association at P.O. Box 70276, Nashville, Tennessee 37207 is organizing a convention on April 10th to 11th in Nashville featuring a wrestling trade show, an auction, and an awards banquet. Send a SACE for more information. Jamie Ward of 2824 Quaint Street, Sicane, Pennsylvania 19018 is selling his entire wrestling collection of programs, photos, newsletters, and tapes from the late 70s through 1992. Send a SACE for more information. R. Van Cavalier of Route 2 Box 810, Williston, Florida 32696, is selling his collection of Florida wrestling programs mainly from 1979-87. Send a SACE for more information. Bill Donna of Road 2 Box 480, Brockway, Pennsylvania 15824 is looking for tapes of Northeast Championship Wrestling and New England States Wrestling.
D. Davis of 4392 Old Mulkey Road, Tompkinsville, Kentucky 42167 is looking for raw footage of indie shows, wrestling t-shirts, Miami Dolphins souvenirs and country music concert tapes.
He has a list of tapes he can trade in exchange. Roy Lucier of 14322 Harrington Street, Garden Grove, California 92643 is looking for information on woman wrestler Sabrina and tapes of Canvas Cavity.
Jason Lyer of 2517 Clear Lake Way, Sacramento, California 95826 is looking to purchase replicas of the Ric Flair NWA title belt and the WWF Intercontinental title belt. Mike Rogers of 2740 SC Llewellyn, Troutdale, Oregon 97060 is interested in buying or trading wrestling results from the 70s and is looking for defunct title belts for sale from any promotion. Mike Sawyer of 831 Pasadena Avenue, Niagara Falls, New York 14304 puts out newsletter leg drop for $1.25 per issue. JT Bragg of 1210 Casey Creek Road, Chesney, South Carolina 29323 is looking for videotapes of matches with Randy Savage from the old PAFO ICW.
He's also selling independent wrestling videotapes from 1979 present. Joe Hamilton Jr. of 3040 Hudson Street, Baltimore, Maryland 21224 is looking for NWA and WWF videos from 1979-83.
Joseph Marciani of 212E Broadway #G507, New York 10002 is looking for WWF Ice Cream Bar Cared and Wonderama NWA cards, 1984-85 WWF magazines and programs from the first two WrestleManias.
James Weaver of 403 N Madison, Macomb, Illinois 61455 is looking for the March 30, 1991 and December 18, 1991 SWS cards, All Japan Women tapes from 1991 present, May 6, 1991 Liger vs. Ozzy match,
UWA matches with Can-Am Express vs. Los Cowboys and Headhunters vs. Los Cowboys and tapes of Jushin Liger and Ultimo Dragon from Mexico.
Anto Kramast of 55 Harvard Avenue, Gloucester, New Jersey 08030 puts out the newsletter Shooting Star Press and will send a sample copy to anyone who sends a SACE.
Diane Devine of 4150 E Iowa Avenue No. 406, Denver, Colorado 80222 has a list of old wrestling magazines for sale.
Send a SACE for an inquiry.
Re-emphasis on house shows / title credibility.
The downtrend in overall popularity of wrestling can be blamed for the arena business falling off. But I believe the real reason is that people know that nothing ever happens without television cameras. Live shows are run too often in the undercards and weak, with stale talent, and the result is poor matches with little fan interest. An almost complete restructuring of how the house show business is run is needed. My proposal combines old-style promotional concepts with a variation of Japan's tour schedule system. A. Eliminate the stale talent that is no longer either over or has the ability to work a decent match.
Replace them with better workers underneath. The idea is to have a better crew, but still maintain enough character-based wrestlers to satisfy the audience that comes just for the gimmicks.
B. Run houses in a tour-like fashion. Tours would be 3 weeks or so. Give the guys a day off here and there, generally before the weekend. After that stretch, there would be a week to 10 days off. This would allow the wrestlers more time to rest and spend time with their families while not always under the gun of having to go back to work the next day. Also, do more localized interviews. The rest time should also allow the wrestlers to work harder, knowing at the end of the run they've got 10 days for their bodies to heal up. C. Pick cities strategically.
Only major cities that consistently draw should be run.
The rest of the cities should have hit infrequently. This should make the live shows in those cities seem special because they are infrequent. Centralize the tours to cut down on air travel costs. D. Only one show should be run per night. This will save the costs of flying 2 crews around and renting 2 arenas that don't pay off.
Attendance should increase with the one loaded show. With more of an emphasis on workers, show quality should improve and fans won't leave disappointed.
E. Add a new segment to the television shows. This segment, called the WWF Arena Tour Report, would hype the arena shows. Before a tour begins, the report would list the tour dates, title defenses on the tour, and update the news from the most recent tour. During the tour, the report would update the week that had just ended and hype the upcoming week and talk about any angles that occurred at the houses. F. Run angles during every tour. Run the same angle in 4 cities during the same week. Make sure they are cities with a decent amount of distance in between them.
Run the exact same angle in every city.
In one city, have a cameraman tape the angle with a handheld camera. In the 3 cities where the angle isn't taped, show a localized arena tour report for that city that talks about the angle in the city, but don't air the footage. People in those cities will believe their house show was important to the national scene even though there were no cameras there. In the city where the angle was taped, and in other cities, air the taped footage and mention the city where it took place. When you talk about the angle on national shows or in the regular commentary, never mention the city. G. Limit WWF title matches to 3 per tour. The champion should spend the rest of his time in tag team matches.
Limit IC and tag title matches to 5 per tour.
H. During the arena reports that air between tours, Gene Okerlund recaps the final week of the previous tour and talks about the upcoming tour, hyping the cities with the upcoming title matches. As the title matches take place, talk about the results.
Because you're giving the results, you'll have to mix up the challengers, which creates a wider variety of matches.
The key part of this is to make the title matches rare, therefore the chance that something special might happen is increased. Spread defenses out so it is rare that any show has more than one title match. Shows without title matches should be headlined by major grudge matches. Hulk Hogan is needed for this. Also by non-title matches.
Occasionally the challenger should win non-title matches to set up return matches for the next time there is a show in that city.
John Muse. Detroit, Michigan.
Response from Dave Meltzer: actually advertising 13 different title matches for each 3-week tour at once would create the illusion that there are tons more title matches than before, not less, even though there would be less.
This would accomplish exactly what you're trying to avoid.
Right now fans generally during a 6-week period hear about 1 or 2 title matches that come to their specific house shows and are oblivious to title matches occurring in the rest of the country unless a pay-per-view show is being promoted, and even then they aren't hearing about more than 3 at a time. There are advantages of doing a road schedule similar to the Japanese tours in that guys have 2-week breaks to rest and heal up at the end of a grind.
WCW. I'm so glad Bill Watts is meticulously protecting the royal secrets of the wrestling business, so I was shocked, truly shocked, when on the October 3rd Saturday night show on the Control Center in the first hour, there were young Dustin Rhodes and Barry Windham advertised as defending their newly won tag team belts at the pay-per-view.
I then sat glued to the screen and was on the edge of my couch for the title match in the second hour of the show, where surprised Jim Ross and Arnold Anderson called the match where they actually won the belts.
How did Ross know the result ahead of time?
Why did he forget just minutes later when the match started?
Is this like a twin referee angle? Will whomever goofed be fined, flogged, or forced to watch the Turner Cartoon Channel for 4 straight days and nights? Also, since Jim Ross only has daughters, does this mean that WCW will be bringing back women's wrestling? Eddie Goldman. New York, New York. So the Steiners are leaving WCW. Just when WCW improves its perception a little bit, they lose another key name to the opposition. I realize WCW needs to make drastic cuts to keep expenses down, but this will be another blow to the company's credibility like the Ric Flair loss. If wrestling ever dies like roller derby, the records will show that the WWF was the major league and WCW was a regional promotion with good television exposure. It's becoming too familiar a scene watching these guys leave WCW for the WWF.
You mentioned before that you think a network like ESPN could benefit from airing Japanese wrestling. I agree, but how do you think a good way is to bring it to their attention?
Call the program director. How about sending them a sample tape? Would it be a lost cause? I think if they aired tapes at 11 p.m. Saturday nights, they'd do well in the ratings.
Tempo aired Japanese women on Saturdays and FNN almost carried New Japan, so I think ESPN could do away with one of their fishing or exercise shows and do better with Japanese wrestling.
Once people caught on to it, it would get ratings.
Ratings are down in the US because the WWF is stale and WCW sometimes has good TV but they are inconsistent and lack nationally recognized name talent.
An average Joe who hates American wrestling would probably enjoy Japanese wrestling. Vinnie Carolyn. Stoughton, Massachusetts.
Response from Dave Meltzer: considering Japanese baseball has never gotten on a major cable network and baseball is our national pastime, it's hard to believe a major cable network would be interested in a Japanese product in a fringe sport like wrestling. The timing of doing so today would be even more difficult since television executives, who would never know there was a product difference, believe wrestling is yesterday's news. Sending a tape would be fruitless because a TV exec won't know wrestling quality from anything else.
The women would have the best chance just because it's so culturally different that someone who knows nothing about it may like it. I don't know how well a Japanese wrestling would do on television as compared with WWF and WCW, although it surely would do a lot better than something like Herb Abrams or the global stuff that is already on cable networks, and I can't believe it couldn't easily outrate fishing shows and the like.
On the other hand, there is a decent amount of foreign soccer available on cable sports channels, and soccer has far less of a television following in this country than pro wrestling. All companies, when big changes are made, will do big things. The bottom line is wrestling. To the fan, what goes on in the ring is the difference. Watts will make the difference given enough time. After all, what does WCW have to lose? Jeff Archie, Hendersonville, Tennessee. November 2, 1992 Observer Newsletter, Horrendous WCW Pay-Per-View, Decline in Wrestling, Flair Career in Jeopardy. By Observer Staff. Staff at WrestlingObserver.com. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. November 2, 1992. Halloween Havoc Night of the Promotional Living Dead. Thumbs up 26.07. 2%. Thumbs down 317, 87.6%. In the middle 19.05. 2%. Best match poll. Brian Pillman vs. Rick Steamboat 118 votes. Rhodes and Wyndham vs. Austin and Williams 92 votes. Big Van Vader vs. Nikita Koloff 27 votes. Zink and Douglas and Gunn vs. Anderson and Eden and Hayes 19 votes. Worst match poll. Rick Rude vs. Masa Chono 116 votes. Ron Simmons vs. Barbarian 109 votes.